Hey, back with Chad Burkhart, Kerry Lipinout, SLP, and we talked about the 5 kind of type signs, symptoms for kids. We did a different video for babies. Right now it's kind of on to kids of kind of some things that maybe get overlooked, and now we're in that 4, 5, 6 years old. And I think the one thing that parents tell me is the speech difficulties is maybe the most frontal thing that they find not pronunciating, whether a parent notices it or a caregiver or a preschooler teacher. So kind of talk about that, and we'll get into some of the other things.
Yeah, so if we're thinking about oral restrictions and how that might play out, or if our tongue isn't doing its job of lifting up towards the palate, it doesn't develop the movement patterns that it should for speech. So that rest posture, that tongue up posture should be kind of the foundation of everything. It's the foundation for the movement patterns. So a lot of kiddos who have that oral restriction are going to have difficulties with pronunciation of kind of these like target sounds, specifically usually S and Z, SH, CH, J, so sh, ch, j, those sounds, and then the R and the L. Those are typically the most common. But that's because the back part of the tongue isn't doing what it needs to do with the elevation.
Kerry, in your opinion and your expertise, like what is there an age, frame where we're like, okay, this is we should evaluate this? Is it a wait and see? Is it every case is different, or any direction on that?
It's tricky when it depends on kind of what errors you're hearing.
Okay.
So every kid is different. A lot of, I would say in general, you could say if there's kind of a slushy quality, so like that sound coming out the sides of the mouth, or that lisp where the tongue is coming forward, those are things that I would check out age 4 and beyond at all. Okay. The R sound, of course, most people are going to tell you that it's a later developing sound, but in my opinion and in my experience, if a kid doesn't have it by like age 5 or 6, it's very likely not going to develop on its own. Okay. So I would say it's always good to check it out. Yeah. An evaluation will just give you more information.
There's some good kind of guidelines. And, we talked about a previous video we made about babies, and that's, a lot of times, say we have the speech difficulties, dig back into their history, right? Like, was there lots of spit up? Was there some torticollis? Was there like overall tension? How's tummy time? So you kind of dig into that, and I'm sure we take that into effect, and now we're having maybe some issues with our R. Like, right. Okay, the likelihood of their needing an oral evaluation becomes higher and higher. Right. If we have some of these symptoms that we had or we grew out of that are now showing up in the speech, kind of realm.
Right, yeah. We don't need a 6-year-old to do tummy time anymore. Yeah, you're right. They always grow into different things.
Right, yeah. So I think that's the most, like the speech difficulties is the most thing that we can hear, we can see. Let's talk about maybe restless sleeping / like teeth grinding and how that interplays with some oral restrictions.
Yes, so it all has to do with breathing, and breathing when we're sleeping is so important for how we reach those deep, high quality sleep minutes. Thinking about how our rest posture has to do with that. If our tongue is up and suctioned to the palate at rest during sleep, our airway opens up and we can breathe easily and effectively. It also calms our nervous system down. So some of our cranial nerves are up in the palate that help. When we have that connection, we can maintain that calm rest and digest state. So when we are either mouth breathing or having some sort of resistance in the airway during sleep, it can really impact the ability to go through those natural sleep cycles, and it really can kind of jolt your body in and out of them. And so you have this like broken sleep.
Yeah, and that's why I love working with Kerry is that, if they come through us, there's some sleep issues. There could be some nervous system things that we can handle, but we're seeing these other things like open mouth posture. Do we snore sometimes? Kind of diving into that story of that child, and we say, okay, we need an oral. There's something else there. And I think something we talk with babies is that open mouth, posture while they're sleeping or not sleeping, just open mouth posture, and that airway goes to what you said about that sleeping. So when we're sleeping, some of those things get shut off, right? But when we're awake and we're still having an open mouth, we're breathing through our mouth. Talk about more just the breath and the airway and how that interplays.
Yeah, so during wakefulness, is that what you're asking? Yeah. So even while you're awake, when you're breathing through your mouth, we miss that whole natural filtration system of the nose. So the nose is made for breathing, the mouth is made for talking and eating. when we breathe through our nose, the worm gets warmed, it's filtered and sterilized, and we create a gas called nitric oxide, which basically is a natural vasodilator. So it opens up the lungs and allows for greater oxygenation of the blood and all the muscles. So it really has an impact on everything.
Yeah, and that's when we have more colds, more sicknesses,
Allergies.
runny nose, where we're allergies, right? Because we're not having that filter, basically. It's going all right back into our throat and our adenoids.
Right.
Maybe we can go down that road too. We won't today, but like getting adenoids. Okay, maybe that's necessary. Maybe we're putting a Band-Aid on that.
Right.
Maybe we got to kind of peel back those layers of the onion, and that's why I think if we're having some of these signs, symptoms, you're seeing some of these things in your children, it's worth getting an oral function first, because there's some things that you can show parents, and some things that we can do before we end up having surgery.
Right, exactly. I always think about the surgery being the last.
Yep, it'll always be there.
Last option, right? It shouldn't be the first line of defense. The first line of defense should be teaching the body how to breathe properly, so that we can see if that alone might change how much inflammation is in the body, and then creates an easier cycle for breathing again. But yeah, you're right. I think the surgery is a Band-Aid.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah. I
but-
think, and
Sometimes necessary. But
sometimes necessary, right? It'll always be there.
Yeah.
And I think if we do surgery, whether that be a tongue tie or get adenoids out, whatever, what is there going to things that are going to show up later?
Right.
You know, so we're fixing one thing to maybe be causing another. So
Right.
surgery, yeah, it'll always be there, and that's why I love working with you.
Right.
Something we didn't talk about with kids as they're eating, as we transition from milk to into like solid foods. Talking about the eating.
Yeah. So a lot of times what I see is kiddos who are super picky, will only eat the super soft diet, the white standard American diet. The chicken nuggets is their only meat, maybe a hamburger if we're lucky, but they won't eat anything that's kind of complex in texture or flavor, because their tongue commonly just doesn't manage it well. So we have lack of control. The other piece I think that plays into it is if we're mouth breathing, our nasal passage gets stuffed up, and then nobody wants to eat. I mean, try eating
Right.
while you're plugging
Yes.
your nose. It's terrible.
Yes.
So
Yes.
it's kind of this vicious cycle. But I think a lot of kids end up being on that picky bandwagon, or they end up in the road where they're overstuffing. They're putting like half a banana in their mouth, or a huge bite of a sandwich, and then they can barely manage it.
And that's just because of the coordination before babies like suck, swallow, breathe.
Yeah.
And that's that breathing, eating, just managing all that is just overwhelming. So they just eat really fast,
Yeah, or
and then take a breath.
They
Or
stuff it because thinking about if your tongue can't move as far as it should, if you put more food in there, it doesn't have to move so far.
right,
If you put a small amount, you
Right.
have to use your tongue to push it further.
right. So you're creating
That
more
makes sense.
volume. So
Yeah,
you
yeah,
can, okay,
exactly. Mm-hmm.
yeah, totally makes sense. God, this is good stuff. It's really good. Yeah, I know it's really good. Gosh, I think that we kind of covered. We talked about this. We talked about the eating. We talked about the restless sleeping, the teeth grinding, some things to look for there. Open mouth posture, the eating part. I think the texture thing, that was really good. The texture thing, like, oh, well, they're just picky.
Right.
Well, why is that?
Yeah.
There's a reason for that.
Yeah.
And I think
that's multifaceted.
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I think that's worth an eval. And I think, we talk about the need for orthodontia, but if we're only eating chicken nuggets and French fries and these soft foods, we're not developing the jaw. We're not developing those things. And so, I've talked to dentists, and like you go to these undeveloped countries, they don't need orthodontists, right?
Right.
They're chewing, they're doing these things, they're complex textures and doing those things. And so I think having a picky eater, can maybe save you some money later with orthodontia. Get that evaluated.
Potentially. Yes.
All right, so make sure to reach out to Kerry. We'll have all of her information. We obviously have our information too. Can continue the conversation, and she'll be happy to chat with you and see if an eval is necessary. And obviously reach out any way you can, and we'll help you guys out.